Good morning, welcome in, and thanks so much for joining us here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short, the financial advisors and the father-son team behind Welcome Home Financial Partners. You can find out more about them, the entire team, over there on the website, welcomehomefp.com. You can also schedule the time to speak with them. Come to one of their offices, one of their 3 offices right here in the Richmond area, welcomehomefp.com, or you can give a call, 804-635-3550. Don't worry, we're not going to put you on the air right now. This is not the meeting with Ralph and Tim. It's just to get on the calendar for the week or the weeks ahead. Again, 804-635-3550. My name is Chris Swan, and I'm pleased to be joined with Ralph and Tim. Gentlemen, good to see you again. How are you today?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Doing well, thank you. You know, we've mentioned it before. At the beginning of summer, it's always a lot to do and a lot of money being spent. And then as time goes on, he gets bored. You know, it's a little quieter, a little calmer. There are parallels to that in retirement. You know, it's not going to be a consistent amount that you're spending throughout. Maybe you're spending a good bit to begin with, doing all the things that you wanted to do, but with a properly structured retirement roadmap like you guys create for every client, that's, you know, finding ways to make sure that that retirement doesn't get jeopardized by unnecessary or excessive spending or excessive market exposure. That customized retirement roadmap, again, begins with that call, 804-635-3550, and we're going to dive in. But first, I want to thank you guys for taking time out of your schedule to spend with the listeners. Wall Street has a nickname for everyday investors, the dumb money. It's not particularly kind, but the assumption is that regular people tend to panic, chase trends, and make emotional decisions while professionals stay disciplined. But some analysts say individual investors have actually been surprisingly resilient during recent market sell-offs. Robinhood's Steve Quirk tells CNBC that they stepped in to buy when others were selling.
They're actually very savvy. They bailed out the market during COVID, and they bailed it out again during the tariffs. Like, they were aggressive buyers.
So we all know the adage, buy low, sell high. When markets tumble, is buying the dip a smart move, or is it a costly mistake?
Well, I think everybody's going to be a little bit different. I think it's a good idea to buy when it's low and sell when it's high, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we've always been told that. The issue is being diligent with it. And I think there's a lot of folks out there that are concerned, especially what we see, and I know Dad probably say the same thing, is, you know, when people are getting closer to retirement and things go south, that's when people are, like you said, making those emotional, irrational decisions, right? If you see the market drop 10, 20%, hey, it's time to get out. Well, maybe that's not the right time to get out. Maybe it's time to put more money into it. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, because it's different when we're in retirement or close to retirement, and it's different when we're 20, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that, you know, we've got a structured plan to be flexible, because look, we know the market's going to go up and we know the market's going to go down. We just don't know how bad or how much or when that's going to happen or how long that's going to take place. So that's the biggest thing. And what we don't want to do is make a mistake. And Chris, I can tell you there's a lot of people out there that when they're in the market and they get really uneasy, if you will, with all the world events, so to speak. And, you know, we've got to make sure that the plan is going to incorporate guarantees and making sure that they can do what they want when they retire and not worrying about the debt.
And I would say, Chris, a lot of clients will come in and say, you know, they've looked at their retirement accounts and they will just say, am I making smart decisions or am I just following the crowd? And that is something that's ever crossed your mind. That's kind of why, as a fiduciary, they come to us and say, what should I be doing now? I'm not saying that we're going to be 100% correct, but at least we've got a little bit of experience in making some good, smart decisions for them. And yes, Wall Street, when they call people the dumb money, the individual investors, why is that? Mainly because, have you ever had a finance class when you were growing up through high school? Have you ever had, unless you were, you know, trained in banking or insurance or things, investment portfolios, you probably don't know anything about it because we were never trained that way. And most of our parents were never trained that way, so they couldn't tell us some advice, sage advice, from the older generation, Tim, that might help them a little bit along the way. But, you know, if I don't believe they're dumb, I just think they need to have some people sit down with them and explain a few things. And if that's kind of where you are, like I said again, give us a call. But I think a lot of people get into a situation where they sit there and they let fear and hype and social media or whatever make decisions for them without understanding why they should be doing this. And I know, Tim, you've seen it many a time. And Yes, today we're in a strong market. Record highs and all that, but that doesn't mean it's a safe market.
Right.
You need to understand when you have market at its all-time high, it looks good on your statements, but that statement from your 401k or your retirement account doesn't necessarily mean that's a financial plan. That just says, hey, this is what it's worth today. If it drops tomorrow, what are you going to do? And that's where a lot of people have an issue with everything that you don't want to follow the crowd. You want to have a personalized plan just for you to get where you want to go, not your neighbors, not your son, but where you want to go.
And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we see investors make is assuming that every market decline will recover quickly, right? We always feel like, when COVID hit, the market dropped pretty quickly in the matter of 30 to 45 days and then came roaring back, right? That's not normal. So if you think, okay, hey, the market's down 10% or 15% or 20%, well, let's take our life savings and put in there. Well, how long is it going to take to recover? And is it going to recover? We don't know, right? So I think that's the biggest thing that people have to pay attention to is, sure, we want to buy low and sell high, but we don't know the highs and the lows, and we want to make sure that our plan's going to incorporate things that we want to do. And look, Chris, nobody out there listening right now has worked so hard to not do the things that they want to do in retirement.
Right.
Now, don't get me wrong, everybody's a little bit different, right? We all want different things, but that's the whole thing is you don't want to say, well, I can't take this trip because the market's down for this year. What kind of retirement's that?
And I would say to you, Chris, and there's only really one retirement. Most people don't retire 2 or 3 times from a job, unless maybe you work for the federal government or military, things like that. But you only get one retirement, and there's no, practice rounds. There, if you're wondering if you're on the right track, now's the time to ask. Give us a call before the next market correction, not after. And that's the thing you need to understand. Sometimes it's a little bit too late after the market crash that maybe I should have done something differently, particularly when you're in retirement.
You're not going to be able to get fire insurance on your house if there's already embers on the roof. You want to go ahead and be prepared and tactical about it. Everyone's situation is different, and that's why everyone's retirement should look different. Let me give out that number really quick that Ralph was talking about. It's 804-635-3550. That is how you set up that complimentary time to speak with the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners. Start developing your own customized retirement roadmap. They're going to sit down, have that conversation with you, figure out where you are right now, where you want to go, and then design that roadmap around it to get you there. It's going to look different from everyone out there. But one thing that I think is pretty common is it's very difficult to be objective with money when it is your own money. It's been years since I've watched these. I don't even know if they still air, but all the poker tournaments that used to be on ESPN. There were many times where I would watch it with friends and I go, oh yeah, no, I would totally bet on that or whatever because I don't have any money in it. Sitting at the table by myself where it's my own money and of course smaller stakes like $5 a hand. I'm a little bit more conservative about it. And so chances are you're the same way when it comes to your own investments. It's easy to say, yeah, buy on the dip and buy low, sell high. It makes sense. But when you're in it, go back to COVID, go back to the March of 2020 and how many people got out of the market and weren't able to get back in until it's fully recovered. If you have a team on your side to instill that discipline, like Ralph Short, like Tim Short, fiduciaries acting in your best interest, can go a long way to, allaying some of those fears and concerns. So schedule a time to speak with them. Have that conversation, 804-635-3550, or go online to welcomehomefp.com. People are coming up with new retirement formulas all the time. And, what we do here on the show is put them under the microscope. There's a new one called the rule of thirds. And the idea is to divide your savings evenly into 3 buckets. You got your guaranteed income, Social Security, pensions, perhaps an annuity, your fixed income investments like treasuries and bonds and CDs, and then equities, stocks, ETFs, mutual funds. I know on the show, and I know, in general, we avoid talking in, one-size-fits-all strategies, but what is your thought on the rule of thirds?
Well, I think the rule of thirds is a useful conversation starter, but I would not treat it as a universal retirement formula, right? Dividing money equally among guaranteed income, fixed income, and equities may be a sound balance, and it sounds great, right? But not every retiree has the same expenses or income needs or wants or risk tolerance or tax concerns. The list goes on and on. So that's why, what we see quite a bit, especially in our area, our market, is there's a lot of people that have worked side by side, shoulder to shoulder for 20, 30, 40 years, and they feel like, hey, well, all need to be doing the same thing. Well, odds are, chances are, that the scenario is not going to be the same, right?
Right.
You might have 2 kids, the other person might have 10 kids, one person might have been married 4 times, somebody maybe never got married, and that's where, a lot of things are going to be different, because the biggest thing in retirement is knowing what you need for your expenses and do the things that you want to do, right? I think most people out there will say, and I've heard it before, and I know Dad will say the same thing, is, hey, I'm not super concerned about the rate of return. I'm not super concerned about my account balances. As long as I can do the things that I want to do and I don't have to worry about it, I don't care, right? And I think, with the guaranteed income portion, I think that gives the peace of mind. But also we want to make sure that we've got growth as well. So we've got to walk that line of figuring out, okay, hey, and maybe it's not thirds, maybe it's fourths, maybe it's fifths, maybe it's whatever, but there's so many different investment opportunities out there. And what we've got to figure out is, number one, we got to make sure that we've got the cash flow, right? We need to make sure that we got the emergency savings, because things are going to happen. Things that you didn't foresee, things that you didn't want to happen will happen. So we've got to make sure that we've got the emergency there. But step number 2 is going to be talking about the income, right? What income needs do we have? How do we set that up guaranteed? And then it's also the play money, right? So after we've got our lifestyle covered, then what can we play around with? You were talking about the $5 hands. It's probably not going to be the same when it comes to the market, but we want to make sure that we do have the ability to make that 10, 20, maybe 30% return on some of that money. So I think it's important to have different buckets of money, and we've got to make sure that it's tailored to each individual client, because once again, not everybody's going to be in the same situation.
And your life experience as you grow older is probably going to change from where it is right now. Your health may decline, so you may not be able to do some of the things that you talked about. But I think there's too many people in their early retirement they do not understand what might happen if they wait too long to spend some of their money and enjoy it. And there are a lot of people out there that's afraid in the first 5 or 6 years to enjoy life. Isn't that what you are there for in your early retirement? Because sooner or later there's going to be a time when you can't do anything because your health has deteriorated that much. And I'd say a lot of people need to understand this. I mean, if your retirement plan is nothing but a stack of statements, just a pile of investments, you're probably missing the most important thing that you need to be worried about. And that's a written income plan to make sure that your money will last as long as you do. Isn't that the goal of everything? Yes, if you want to leave a legacy, that's fine, but you need to make sure that money that you work so hard for is going to sustain you and the lifestyle that you want. That's part of what we do when we have the retirement roadmap. It gives you a visualization of whether you have it or not.
And being able to find out, ahead of time. We talk about the importance of doing this, not as you're, hey, I'm getting ready to retire tomorrow. You want to do a little bit of work ahead of time. It's not to say that it's ever too late. There may be more steps that you need to take along the way to get to where you want to be. But, if you have that conversation with the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners sooner rather than later, you can find out where you stand right now and if any changes need to be made, how to make those changes and go about it. When it comes to these rules of thumb, the rule of thirds, 4% rule, the rule of 70, I could go on and on. It's a good place to start, but at the end of the day, you want to find something that is specific for you. As you said, Tim, maybe it is, the rule of fourths, or maybe it's a, 40% split. It really depends on your situation, and so that is why that conversation is imperative when you sit down and you speak with the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners. That's also why it's complimentary to, help set your mind at ease to begin that planning process and figure out what is going to work best for you. That all starts with picking up the phone, setting up a complimentary time to speak with them, 804-635-3550. You can go online to the website, find out more about them, the entire team, the events that they have going on throughout the area. That website is welcomehomefp.com. As we talk about building a retirement plan, again, not retirement accounts, retirement plans, dividend-paying stocks often come up. And it is true, companies can cut or suspend dividends at any time. But if you look at a company like Kimberly-Clark, it's paid a dividend for 92 years, dating all the way back to 1934. That's consistent, and that's what you hear people talking about, those dividend aristocrats. The big question is, are there companies with that kind of track record still out there?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think there are companies out there that have long histories of paying and increasing their dividends, and that sounds attractive, but investors should never choose a stock based on the size of its current yield, right? So I think, there's a lot of folks out there that are super concerned about taxes. I'm kind of going back to the question that we had before, and there are some people who are afraid to spend money because they're afraid of taxes. Well, I can tell you, you can bury your head in the sand all you want, but if you got pre-tax money, Uncle Sam's going to come knocking at your door sooner rather than later. And that's one of those things that we talk to a lot of people about of, hey, how can we spread out that tax burden, if you will, instead of just letting it snowball. And then we hit age 72, 73, 70 and a half, or 75. And next thing we know, we've got a lot of taxes there. But, talking about dividend paying stocks, is if they're qualified dividends, they could be taxed at a lesser rate. So I think it is important, once again, is everybody's going to need different things or want different things, but dividend paying stocks could be a really good strategy in retirement, because if, hey, we can supplement our monthly income with dividends, why not, right? But in today's world, in today's market, every day is going to bring something different. You hear one headline, market's going to fluctuate. You hear another headline, the market's going to change again. And, it's important to make sure that we've got some consistency there. And I think that's where dividends kind of come in, is dividends are never guaranteed. And I can tell you there's probably some people out there listening right now that are like, wait, what? Well, they're not guaranteed, right? But most companies, if they are using dividends, if they are paying dividends out, they are usually fairly consistent. So once again, I think that could be a good strategy for some income in retirement.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, if they're depending on that dividend income to pay your monthly expenses, they need to ask themselves this question: what happens to my monthly expenses if I don't receive that much dividend, or maybe not at all? I mean, I'm not saying they're not going to pay it, but they have the right to declare whatever dividend they have. So that's something that they probably need to think about. And I think there's a couple, well, more than a couple, but there's a lot of people out there that's always looking for that perfect investment that's going to give you great return, great dividends, and there is no risk that the market would ever go down.
Where is that?
Let me just tell you one thing. It doesn't exist. I don't care if you're Elon or if you're Bill or whoever. It's just not there. You just have to understand how the market works. And, it's not, the goal shouldn't be to own that perfect investment. The goal should be to let's see and structure my investment portfolio so I have growth and I have income and I have protection all wrapped into the plan. I didn't say the investment, I said the plan. So that's one thing as fiduciaries we kind of go through on our roadmap process.
When you get closer and closer to retirement, that ROI should shift from that return on investment to the reliability of income. Do you have that consistent income coming in? Because as you guys said, the power company, your a grocery store, your insurance, it doesn't care if the market is down. You still have to pay for, the goods and services that you're going to receive. So it doesn't matter what the dividends aren't paying. If you've got consistent income coming in to cover those expenses, it can go a long way to alleviating, if not outright eliminating that fear that so many people have. Do I have enough going into retirement? Well, sit down and have a conversation with the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners with Ralph and Tim Short. They'll let you know where you are right now. And again, if there are things that, it's a roadmap essentially. How do we get to the destination that you've envisioned? And if we veer off course, and that's going to happen over the course of, a 20, 30-year retirement, a couple times probably, how do we get back on track? That retirement roadmap begins with setting up a time to speak with them, welcomehomefp.com, or you can give a call, 804-635-3550. Perhaps that roadmap leads you to Florida. It's in your dream, including a new home there. Well, this could be the year to act. Voters will decide in November on a new property tax relief for primary residences, potentially starting in 2027. And with no state income tax, Florida has already been a pretty big draw for retirees. When you're helping clients choose where to live, how much does the tax strategy really move the needle or sway the decision?
Well, there are a lot of people that want to relocate, but I want to kind of go back off what you just said. So, Chris, if my dividends and my return in the market's not doing well, so Dominion Power is not going to keep increasing my power bill?
They're probably going to say, you know what? you still owe us, or we're going to shut things off. You got to be in the dark.
So I just wanted to make sure, because there's been some increase there. But yeah, I think, when it comes to relocating, this is one of the things that we talked to a lot of people about. You need to test drive this. Yeah, sure, it sounds great. Yeah, property tax relief, like less income tax on pensions, whatever, right? It all sounds good, but there's always going to be that gotcha. And I think that's where, hey, we can say, hey, well, we don't have state income tax. Well, great, that sounds fantastic. But then what else are we going to tax? Are you going to be able to cover your home with house insurance because of hurricanes, right? Mm-hmm. So, any meaningful property tax relief could be a valuable thing for retirees. And I think that's where, when it comes to relocating, it's very important to test drive, because you can read the headlines, you can get into the weeds, but until you live it, it's hard to actually really determine if it's going to be a fit for you. And I think that's what is important for a lot of people, is retirement is going to be something that you don't quite get, right? You might think you have a really good idea, but I can tell you, once you change perspectives, you get into retirement, things are going to look a little bit different. Might not be astronomical, but there could be some changes that you want to see. And I think that's where, when you get into retirement, we have to test drive. What we don't want to do is relocate, and the next thing you know, it's not quite as rosy as you thought it was going to be, and now we have to backtrack. So that's where I think a lot of people need to, hey, okay, if we've got a really good plan, well, let's execute the plan, but make sure that we've got a little flexibility there.
And I would say also, Chris, one of the points that Tim hadn't made yet is there is an emotional side to it also, because maybe you didn't think that being an extra 3 hours flight-wise from your grandkids is going to present such a problem. But all of a sudden you start having grandkids, things change a little bit. And we've got clients that have moved to where their kids are, and next thing you know, the kids got a different job and they moved from South Carolina to California. So, I mean, those are all things that does happen. And like Tim was telling me, if you move to Florida, you may not be able to get insurance for your house, and then you really are stuck in a quandary in case something happens. And I didn't mean if, it's when, because something's always going to happen, whether it's an accident, whether it's a fire, whether it's a hurricane. Those are all things, and it probably is not the same housing cost as where you presently live, unless you live in New York or one of the upper end states and stuff like that. But I think, it's a big decision, and shouldn't be based on any type of magazine headline or fringe recommendation. You need to understand how it's going to affect you and you alone.
That's we talk about test driving a budget, maybe test driving, a change of locale, find an Airbnb or something you could stay for a while. There are plenty of cities in America that I know that I like to visit, but I would never want to live in. I'm not going to name any of them, but one of them is New Orleans. So I did name that one. But, finding out what you want to do, and if relocating is in the cards, so be it. Bring that to the table, bring that to the conversation. Let Ralph and Tim, let the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners run the numbers and show you what that cost is going to look like from a tax standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, address those things as well. Just other things to think about that you may not have considered before, but as fiduciaries acting in your best interest, they're going to bring those conversations to the table, let you think about them, and let you make that well-informed decision from there. 804-635-3550 is the phone number. The website to set up a time there is welcomehomefp.com. Regardless of what age you are, others in your generation often make the same financial mistakes. There was an article I read recently that said it's because they're following certain assumptions. Guys, what are some of the common mistakes you've noticed, and how do you help prospective clients, prevent them, avoid them?
Well, when it comes down to the generations, I mean, every generation is going to think a little bit different, but I think outdated financial rules, the 4% rule, if you listen to other folks, it could be 8% or 10%. I think that's one of the biggest things that you've got to pay attention to. But also, too, when it comes down to, we see this all the time, right? If we want to pay off a mortgage, if we've got a 2, 3, 4, 5% mortgage where our investments could be outperforming that and should be outperforming that, we want to make sure that we don't want to take a lump sum and lose investable assets just to say, hey, we don't own a mortgage anymore. Because I can tell you, the expenses don't stop when you pay your mortgage off. You still have real estate taxes. You still have insurance. We all know that that continues to go up. We don't see that ever decreasing, right? So if your mortgage is $2,500 and now you pay it off and now you're still spending $600, $700, maybe even $1,000 in insurance and property taxes, those are things that you got to be aware of. But when you go pay your grocery bill, when you're down the street at the grocery store, you're not going to take a brick off your home and pay for that. So, it's more important to have those financial assets and not saying, hey, I don't have a mortgage anymore. But I can tell you there's a lot of people now that are reconsidering home ownership. There's a lot of people out there that want to say, hey, I'm just going to sell my home. I'm going to rent from here on out because I don't want the responsibility. And they do realize that, hey, if I pay off the mortgage, I still have the insurance and the taxes. So, that's something to consider. But one of the things, I've had a conversation with a client the other day, and he was talking about moving into a 55 older plus community, and he didn't want to do it. But of course, his wife was suggesting that they should. And he goes, look, if I go to sell this property, if I get tired of it, I'm kind of pigeonholing myself into one particular sector of the market, and some 20-year-old can't purchase it. So why am I just going to go ahead and buy into that? So those are things that you've got to consider. You don't want to make too many rash decisions just based off of outdated financial rules.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say every generation, we have different challenges. We've got several generations right here on the radio show with us today, I do believe. And it's always different challenges. But the number one thing that a lot of people will tell us when they come in is, have I waited too long to plan? And sometimes that is correct. Sometimes if you're 10 to 15 years out, that's a perfect time to say, hey, let's sit down and have a conversation, because you can maybe iron out some of those mistakes that you made and make some course correction, because that's what our job is for me and Tim, to say, all right, we think you're in a good path, but this is how I would make some recommendations to improve it. And that's what we do with the roadmap. But I think a lot of people, they are either embarrassed when they come in, some of them, or some of them, they don't want to ask any questions because they're too proud, because they don't want to show what they don't know or what they do know. So it doesn't matter what generation you're on, their pride gets in the way of sometimes. And I would say if you're laying awake at night and wondering, am I going to be okay? Think about this. You're not alone. That's why give us a call. Let us help you out.
804-635-3550 is the phone number. We mentioned sticking your head in the sand earlier. We mentioned laying awake at night and wondering, or, delaying having these conversations because you don't think you're ready. Here's the truth of it. Retirement is going to come upon us one way or another, whether it is something that we decide on our own, whether it's something that is decided for us. So why not have these conversations, figure out where you are right now? Sure, there may be work that needs to be done, but at least now you'll know the steps, and you can get, hopefully closer and closer to that retirement that you've envisioned with building that retirement roadmap. Ralph mentioned that people out there, aside from, government employees, federal workers, things like that, more than likely you're only going to retire once, and it's uncharted territory. Why not turn to a team that has helped countless people get to, through, and beyond retirement? A team like Welcome Home Financial Partners. That begins with a phone call, 804-635-3550. Again, 804-635-3550, or you can go online to the website as well, set up a time there. Always available day and night there, welcomehomefp.com. But we want to thank you so much for joining us, spending part of the day right here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short. Hope you have a great day ahead of you. Take care of one another out there. Stay cool if you can. Enjoy the AC. Gentlemen, always appreciate the time. As we wrap up, I'm going to leave you with the final word.
Well, that is very important. And we are hitting the humidity season, so make sure everybody stays safe and cool and enjoy that AC. But, as always, retirement isn't about finding the perfect investment, which a lot of people try to find, or predicting what the market's going to do next. It's about having that written plan that gives you confidence and helps you make informed decisions and prepares you for whatever life throws at you. And I think that's where we come in, is making sure that you've got a team behind you and making sure that you're doing things that are aligned with your current situation. So if you've been listening today and you're wondering whether your investments or income plan or taxes, we haven't even talked about health insurance and Medicare decisions or estate planning, we'd love the opportunity to help. So give us a call. We'd love the opportunity to sit down with you in the office, one of the 3 offices, and have this conversation. So once again, we want to thank everybody for listening, and take care.
All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decision, nor is it intended to be a projection of current or future performance or indication or future results. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Welcome Home Financial Partners and Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness and does not purport to a complete analysis of the materials discussed. All information and ideas should be discussed in detail with your individual advisor prior to the implementation. Each individual investor's situation is different, and any ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstance. Advisor services are offered by Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor in the state of Virginia. Being registered as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Insurance products and services are offered through WPI Holding, Virginia Insurance License Number 138509, an affiliated company. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell or offer to sell advisory services to any resident of any state other than the state of Virginia or where otherwise legally permitted. Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC, and Welcome Home Financial Partners are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency.